Hey, how's life? So this is Sam Harris reading list. I don't know what number this is, but we are on Darwin's Dangerous Idea, Evolution and the Meaning of Life. This was published in 1995. It's by Dennett, one of the Four Horsemen. And so just as a brief step in, this book was long. And I don't recall, I took a bunch of notes here, but I don't recall getting a whole lot out of it. Now, having said that, when I was doing some research related to it after I'd read it, and I listened to the audiobooks of these, because, I'm reading the literature, I'm reading the actual books, and these I'm doing the audio, I just don't have time. I need to fit them in where I can fit them in, especially books like this are very long. So... But this book in particular, from my research, I found that it was shortlisted for like the Nobel Prize or something like that. It had some accolades lingering around the outsides here, around the outside. So there must have been some good content in there. I don't know. I don't remember a whole lot from it. It's kind of a broad survey. It's specifically talking about Darwin and the idea that Darwin had and how that impacted philosophy and thought, etc., etc. So it's kind of a broader scope on that idea, on the impact of the idea. It's not like Dawkins just talking about evolution or something like that. It's more philosophically minded, so it's broader and implicates a lot more areas. So it talks about some of the things that he brings up. Skyhook, the concept of skyhooks and cranes, which are really, in the context of evolution, skyhooks and cranes are like the things that come in and effectuate the evolution of an organism. The things that seem like it's a jump, where something from the outside would have had to influence or been the scaffolding that allowed for this development to occur. So this is the miracle step that creationists would want to bring in and say that this is the necessary miracle step here would be God with his little, when he's doing his cosmic alchemy and he's sprinkling in this or that thing to make sure that we can get all the way to a functional eye from a photo or light sensitive chunk of gunge, I think is the word that Dawkins uses. So skyhooks and cranes, it's an idea related to it. Dennett doesn't believe, Dennett thinks that we are evolved primates. Evolution is just a process. It's a longitudinal algorithmic process that just happened over time, and that's it. That's what we are, and there were no needs for any skyhooks. So he talks about Copernicus and Galileo. He's going over some of the history of scientific endeavor and development. He talks about the biggest gap when it came to talking about Darwin's theory initially was the idea of genetics. Darwin thought that the way that traits were scattered about a population was through averages. So when two people got together, the traits that their offspring would receive would be an average of the traits of the two parents. And Darwin was unsure of the heredity method. We had to wait for Mendel to get the genetics, which would complement so perfectly and really illuminate the whole idea. And Darwin published in The Origin of Species in 1860, wasn't it? Or was it 1865? I know Mendel was in 1865. But Mendel went unnoticed until about 1900. And as far as I know, these two concepts weren't really married effectually until the 1940s. So it took a while for that marriage to occur. So we had all the sides that were really necessary, the Darwinian natural selection side and heredity and genetics from Mendel. He also talks about Locke. I have some notes under, I don't really know that. In the beginning there is mind. All right. Sounds a lot like cogito ergo sum. Nothing can come from nothing. Matter and changes cannot produce thought. Of course, this, Locke was from a while ago. It's not the brightest. Let's just be honest. Matter and changes cannot produce thought. Okay. He talks about Hume, the dialogues concerning natural religion. And I'm sure if I read this a couple of more times, I'd probably get more out of it. I don't know. I wasn't all that particularly inclined to go back through it. Although there's some stuff in there. It didn't feel like there was a larger architecture that I was really working through and learning something new. It felt like a broad philosophical survey. It was like taking a survey course in undergrad or something like that. I'm being a little harsh right now, but whatever the case. So he talks about Hume in the dialogues concerning natural religion, where this is the description. I pulled this description from somewhere. Through dialogue, three philosophers named Demea, have Philo and Cleanthes debate the nature of God's existence. And I know I read this at some point, but I can't remember a whole lot from it. Love Hume, though. Huge Hume fan. Huge Hume fan. There's this idea of number evolution. So we have things that clearly make sense for them to evolve, and he was using numbers as a distinction from that. The ideas of numbers evolving into another number doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And talks about Thomas Malthus and how Malthus may have been a big impact on Darwin when we talk about populations and that sort of thing. So he later talks about Nietzsche on Darwin, how Nietzsche talks about Darwin and the genealogy of morals. I'm not going to go I'm going to read the genealogy of morals specifically for that. I mean, I've read it several times already, but I'm going to read it and do some kind of a thing on it at some point. I'm not sure in what context, but it's one of those books that I pick up on the regular, and got a lot of, even if I might not agree with Nietzsche on a whole lot of stuff, it's got some wonderful ideas, and it's so well written, so much fun to read. Anyway, talks about intentionality and the idea of a bunch of small machines collectively creating intentionality. I think that's what he was getting at that. But the idea of a bunch of small machines, like if we were a bunch of small machines. And in this context, one thing that fascinates me is the idea of the partitions and the competition within our own brain and cells, etc. So the fact that different cells would be competing for their own survival within us, and at the microscopic scale, or even possibly the atomic scale. But so we're this collection of conflicts, and that's what we have, this emergent property of being these driven, complete, larger machines, when in reality, we're no more a collective or individual or combined organism than the planet is, or something like that. So that's an idea that fascinates me. He brings up John von Neumann and the Turing test, and talks about, just computers and intelligence and how that works. I'm kind of studying artificial intelligence right now, so it's really fascinating to see the different kinds of ways you have to think about intelligence. The nature has hundreds of millions of years of a head start on us when it comes to understanding these things, so it's no wonder that we can't really tamp these down all that quickly, but it's absolutely fascinating to think about the way that you have to think about intelligence, because we do it automatically. Even the dumbest of us, we do so many processes automatically, but when you're trying to write that into or build that into some kind of other organism, you see just how complex the freaking thing is. He brings up the Antikythera. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but the Antikythera mechanism. I remember reading about this at one point in the New Yorker, I think it was the first time I saw it, but it's never struck me. Like, nothing about it has actually resonated in my brain. I just remember it's a weird name, and it's supposed to be the first computer or something like that. This is the description that I got of it. Ancient Greek analog computer and orrery used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses for calendar and astrological purposes decades in advance. Okay, so it's calculating astronomical phenomena. Sure, fine, but I don't know how valuable it is overall when it comes to the idea of a computer and etc. Because of course there's the lurid intrigue, just like with the Mayans and determining the end of the world, of somebody from thousands of years ago figured out a computer and they had Windows 95 or something. It's just, alright, so that seems to skew it. And I read that article, I can't remember anything from it, so I could be completely off base, but whatever the case. Brings up Panglossian, as in Pangloss, the character in Voltaire, who was naively or unreasonably optimistic. That's a definition of Panglossian. So there's an idea saying that this must be the best of all possible worlds, and that's just the case. And he brought up the aquatic ape theory, which I didn't get much out of either, as far as I can tell, and I read up on it a little bit, but the aquatic ape theory is just that at some point we had some splinter group that became more aquatic, that had to spend more time in water, did a lot of swimming and frolicking in the waves, and had to eat sea life, etc., etc. And I don't know, it's not well subscribed, and it's relatively controversial, but apparently it's more subscribed by lay people than it is scientists. But I don't see so we've got some some early primates that are spending more time in the water. I don't know. It's not going to change anatomically. It's not change us much that way. I don't know if they're kind of implying that that's one of the reasons that we became hairless apes or something like that, but I don't know what's the import of it. Brings up the prisoner's dilemma, which I see in a lot of these kinds of books. This is from game theory, where if the prisoners work together, they get a certain amount, but if they screw each other over, they get more individually, but the other one gets screwed, but they don't know what the other one's going to do, so it's that game theory back and forth. What do I know? What does he know that I know? What does he know that I know that he knows? Etc., etc. So I remember at least I listened to a class from Yale about game theory, and they were going over all sorts of those kinds of things, and prisoner's dilemma always comes up. I'm not sure how we applied it to evolution. I can't remember now because that's all I have written down here, but whatever. And this idea of mother versus embryo. So you could have that competition, and of course we biologically are structured so that we are supportive of or find the youth cute and want to support them and protect them and all that sort of stuff. But this idea of an organism built out of you that actually becomes parasitic. And so you have to think about the interests against each other and how the mother and the embryo, even while they're growing together, they compete for resources and that sort of stuff. And that's a conflict that had to be played out, millions of times over hundreds of millions of years. Brings up Stephen Jay Gould, who annoys the hell out of me. Someone that brought up this non-overlapping magisteria idea. And here he talks about spandrels. And spandrels are, what's the definition I put here? The space between the shoulders of adjoining arches and the ceiling or molding above. So the idea is that you have to have this spandrel for the arch to be able to stand. And if you don't have that, then it could never stand. So it's a precursor, or could have grown out of, but it's related to the idea of irreducible complexity, that nonsense that was brought up by creationists, a few years ago, that they were trying to sell everywhere. But anyway, he just annoys the hell out of me. Whatever contributions he made to science in general, I don't know if it was worth it just for the annoying nonsense that he spouted at various times. Shoot me if you will. Gould hates adaptationism, which means the idea of everything being an adaptation or being used for something in particular, and I could be misrepresenting that concept, but whatever. The Burgess Shale, which is an exceptional fossil deposit, is discussed. It's just an area that had the perfect circumstances for being able to fossilize a whole bunch of creatures so that we could get an idea of the way these things evolved. And he talks about the KT extinction, which happened about 66 million years ago, and it was an extinction event that eliminated 80% of all species of animals at the time. And I can't remember what period it was between the Cretaceous, I don't know, something. But it seems like 66 million is always the number that goes back to the dinosaurs. That's where we get to. But 80% of all species of animals, they estimate, died at this particular moment in history. And it was only the third most destructive extinction event in history that we know of. So that's fascinating. Just imagine that kind of cataclysmic, apocalyptic event, and you wonder if us as an organism would be able to do better. We'd have to anticipate it dumbass dinosaurs likely didn't, they weren't sitting around contemplating. It wasn't like Deep Impact or that one with Day After Tomorrow or whatever it was, where you've got the scientists running around saying, oh no, this is going to happen and we've got to do something about it. And then, a bunch of bureaucracy prevents them, but they eventually get over it anyway. Wasn't like that with the dinosaurs. They're idiots. They got extincted, except for, the ones that are still around. And then he talks about, and this is one of those damn areas that apparently both Dennett and Dawkins, they are fond of. And I need to read some books specifically about this because I don't understand what the hell they're talking about. Because they talk about genetic versus cultural evolution. I don't get what they're trying to say by cultural evolution, because obviously any given actor within the culture is bound by whatever genetics are going on. So even not just how they develop, like whatever amino acids and proteins they happen to develop and how they look or whatever else, or their muscle density or anything like that, but whatever they're planning on doing or whatever susceptibility they have to any given meme or anything else, it's going to be governed by their biology, by their genetics. So I don't understand why cultural is supposed to be some kind of a separate entity from whatever genetic or biological is. And I don't think it's a worthy distinction. I don't think it's something, because it's something that's used now to say that there's something different. The culture is something other. It's a special thing that just goes out there and takes on a life of its own and creates people in a certain way. And I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I don't think that's a thing. I think you're just making this stuff up so you can maintain sociology majors so they have something to talk about. It's nonsense. Anyway, at some point I'm gonna have to look very deeply into this so I could figure out whether my meager understanding of it is justified in saying that it's nonsense, or, if I get deeper into it, it makes sense to have that distinction, but whatever. Because they use sentences like choose to ignore our genes. What the hell are you talking about? Whatever we're choosing to do is still governed by our genes. If we're choosing to ignore some genes, we're not ignoring the other ones. And whatever the case, those genes are still being expressed. I don't know what you're talking about. It's just a more complex combination of the way that our genes are expressing themselves. So I have this phrase here, set us apart so decisively. Set us apart from nature, apparently, from other organisms. Are we so set apart? I don't think we are. I think the vast majority of what we do is specific. I'm hearing stuff. Sorry. Heard somebody at the door or something? What the hell is going on? Did I lock it? Is this going to turn to a horror movie? Okay, yes, I'm alive. I survived. I don't know what that was. What was I talking about? I can't remember what I was talking about. Set us apart so decisively. I think that what we do is just a more complex reproductive ritual that, building buildings and buying cars and waxing rhapsodic about some philosophical idea. It's still the same stuff. It's the same intuition that we're trying to reproduce in some sloppy, goofy way. And we're trying all sorts of new methods for doing that. And we're not really stepping out of. We're just going, like, we're being defined by the idea of intuitively needing to reproduce. And we're fighting against that to be special, and then fighting against that, it's not particularly interesting or complicated or anything else. Anyway, so yeah, Dawkins says something about the power to fight genes. I just have this phrase here, we are so special, and talks about a child versus a bird, that they're so different. Theory of mind module, I can't remember what that's about. Oh, chimps never compare notes. Yeah, okay, do they not? Really? So when they observe one chimp doing one thing, or when they signal to each other in some way, this isn't comparing notes. And I just, like, the fact of ours sitting down and saying, look, I'm comparing notes with somebody, as if we have some kind of perfect understanding of what we're actually doing. I don't think this is a brash, bold demarcation between us and the rest of the primate world, or the rest of the biological world in general. I really don't think it's that different. So anyway, it talks about Turing and chess computers, which are fascinating now. I mean, most chess computers can beat the best players, not most chess computers, but the best chess computers can beat the best chess players in the world now. And they just had Go. They just did the Go one where they beat the best Go player, which is more complicated than chess. So anyway, I've been playing a lot of chess lately, and I can't even... my basic iPhone app chess, it'll even, like, it warns me it's using too much memory at the moment, and it's not a supercomputer I'm fighting against here. It's just a beta, and I still lose. It's like 50-50. I still can't just run roughshod over it. Then he mentioned the genealogy of morals again, and I don't remember what context, and I didn't write it down, so that's the end of the book. Anyway, I've got some quotes for you, so you can get an idea yourself of what the writing style is and the value might be. Quote, if you want to teach your children they are tools of God, you had better not teach them that they are God's rifles, or we will have to stand firmly opposed to you. Your doctrine has no glory, no special rights, no intrinsic and inalienable merit. If you insist on teaching your children falsehoods, that the earth is flat, that man is not a product of evolution by natural selection, then you must expect at the very least that those of us who have freedom of speech will feel free to describe your teachings as a spreading of falsehoods, and will attempt to demonstrate this to your children at our earliest opportunity. Our future well-being, the well-being of all of us on the planet, depends on the education of our descendants. Okay, good stuff. Good sentiment. It's not particularly ornate, but that needed to be, straightforwardly said, I'm sure. So another quote, but if it is true that human minds are themselves to a very great degree the creations of memes, then we cannot sustain the polarity of vision we considered earlier. It cannot be memes versus us because earlier infestations of memes have already played a major role in determining who or what we are. The independent mind struggling to protect itself from alien and dangerous memes is a myth. There's a persisting tension between the biological imperative of our genes on the one hand and the cultural imperatives of our memes on the other. But we would be foolish to side with our genes. That would be to commit the most egregious error of pop sociobiology. Besides, as we have already noted, what makes us special is that we, alone among species, can rise above the imperatives of our genes, thanks to the lifting cranes of our memes. End quote. What the hell are you talking about? The susceptibility of us to memes is governed by our genes. The degree to which we're going to accept any given meme is still biologically based. It's not special. It's not something other. I feel like I'm going crazy. I don't know what the hell these people are talking about. Is it really a worthy distinction? Is it really that we're so special, we have culture and other species don't? Like, are you serious about this stuff? This doesn't make any sense to me. And here he uses maybe I missed his whole idea. This is what I thought I got from the concept of the cranes and the other thing he mentioned. I thought that was used like very vaguely pejoratively to say that no, this isn't how we function. But here he specifically uses cranes to say that there's some kind of a magical disconnect between our genes and our memes. That we get to pull ourselves out of the doldrums of all other biological life. I don't know what he's talking about. Quote, science, however, is not just a matter of making mistakes, but of making mistakes in public, making mistakes for all to see in the hopes of getting the others to help with the corrections, end quote. Great, yes, that's a good quote. Quote, the fundamental core of contemporary Darwinism, the theory of DNA-based reproduction and evolution, is now beyond dispute among scientists. It demonstrates its power every day, contributing crucially to the explanation of planet-sized facts of geology and meteorology, through middle-sized facts of ecology and agronomy, down to the latest microscopic facts of genetic engineering. It unifies all of biology and the history of our planet into a single grand story. Like Gulliver tied down in Lilliput, it is unbudgeable, not because of some one or two huge change of argument that might hope against hope have weak links in them, but because it is securely tied by hundreds of thousands of threads of evidence anchoring it to virtually every other field of knowledge. New discoveries may conceivably lead to dramatic, even revolutionary shifts in the Darwinian theory, but the hope that it will be refuted by some shattering breakthrough is about as reasonable as the hope that we will return to a geocentric vision and discard Copernicus, end quote. Okay, and that was the last quote. So, agreed. I think it's pretty foundationally set. But anyway, so overall, my recommendation, it's really long. There's some parts, and if you're just interested in the ideas, historical ideas, philosophical ideas, a little bit of science here and there, and just kind of discussing and exploring these things. I don't think it doesn't really go deep enough into any one thing to really be all that vital. It's too broad. It has, like I said, it has some good ideas, and he certainly engaged with people who had specialized training in all these different areas to have this discussion. But still, it doesn't go deep enough to make it really worth really involving yourself in this. It's fine. It's got some good stuff, and it's certainly important when it comes to getting these ideas across the general population. And I certainly wouldn't want to be without it in general, but I don't know if you need to read this thing all the way through. It's too much of a smattering, a collection, a mosaic. It doesn't have enough, I would say, despite being as long as it is. But anyway, so that's this one. That's Darwin's Dangerous Idea, insert subtitle. I don't remember what it is. And that's this episode of Sam Harris Reading List. So if you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, then please send them to thelastcoffeehouse@gmail.com. Go on to the Facebook page. I sincerely appreciate any kind of interaction you might want to have, and I'm happy to respond to it. And otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your friggin' day. All right, thanks.